Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. And this is going to be a bit of a difficult one in terms of subject matter. We're going to be talking about the Celtic Boys Club. And it's a whole can of abuse, really, that's going to be opened up. But the SNP have had many calls of them to start an independent, full, open investigation, a full public inquiry. And yet they've always resisted the urge, as it were. For some reason, they don't want this club looked into in any way, shape, or form. And when you hear this, when you hear that a political party is resisting the calls to investigate this level of abuse, you have to ask why. And I think that this constant refusal to investigate signifies something far deeper and certainly something far darker. But we'll take a look at this article, but just bear it in mind that they are constantly refusing to do this inquiry. Just keep asking yourself why that is. Here goes. So SNP swamped with calls for public inquiry into the Celtic Boys Club abuse, but it still refuses to launch one. What have they got to hide? Why do they not want to open this particular inquiry to see who's been doing what to whom, who's involved? Was there any cover-up? If so, who was covering what up? Who's involved? For them to constantly refuse this, it smacks of something very weird. Let's just say at that point. The Scottish Government have been contacted by concerned Scots demanding that historic abuse in football be independently probed. And there's Frank Carney, dirty old wanker. The Scottish Government has been inundated with calls for them to finally launch a public inquiry into child abuse in Scottish football, including at Celtic Boys Club. But SNP ministers have so far rebuffed any attempts to start one or even include it in the ongoing child abuse inquiry. Fresh requests were made to the government after it was revealed that 9 PEDs has had links to the Parkhead club. The team are also expected to pay out to victims following a class action lawsuit from 20 former youth players for Celtic Boys Club who were targeted by monsters Jim Torbett and Frank Kearney. Now, it's very telling that this is Celtic. It's very telling that Parkhead are trying to cover this up and protect and pay out rather than go to court. And it's very telling that Celtic, of course, are the team du jour of the SNP, and they keep getting invited to games, and there's a lot of, incestuousness between these things. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Before we go any further, I've got to protect myself, so I'm not going to make any direct claims. Everything is going to be questions. Just got to cover that. But you understand exactly where I'm going with on this. Now, the Scottish Daily Express can reveal that a number of worried Scots have written to the Scottish Government pleading for an official probe to be launched. Even an SNP MP, Kirsten Oswald, wrote to the Nationalist Executive on behalf of one of her constituents. One person wrote that it is to Scotland's eternal shame that this matter has not been fully investigated. Another added that these victims need a voice in Parliament so that they can get justice and some closure. And I think one of the problems is that the very same people who are in Parliament may well be very closely aligned with this club, with the things that were going on there, either currently there or certainly in the recent past were involved. I'm not going to name names. But I was told some time ago, and there are people out there who know who this is, and I have had conversations with people, but there is one particular person who is very closely aligned to the point of I'm definitely not going to name him, who's very senior indeed within the party. I'm just going to leave that there because I like my house and I want to keep it. Another concerned Scot even warned that they would get the UK government involved if they continued to be rebuffed by the SNP. They said, if this only affected Scotland, I presume it would fall within the remit of the Scottish Parliament. But current evidence now suggests there was cross-border trafficking of children, not only to England, but also to various European countries and the United States. Therefore, I feel that it should be the responsibility of Westminster to undertake a review of the underbelly of our national game and to initiate a formal inquiry. The Scottish Government have made quite clear that they have no appetite for the same, and of course they don't. Now, we will take an aside at this point and just point out that it is the SNP policy. They are pushing the sexuality of, pushing sexualisation of children. We've seen that. They're putting out these things and asking 5-year-olds to describe what it's like when they touch themselves, for example. They're pushing the sexualisation, the normalisation of highly sexualised material in schools for children very, very young. They've been doing this for a couple of years now. They're also reducing the punishments for people who do things to children. And if you're under 25, you basically walk free. This is the SNP. This is their direction of travel. And then given this as well, you have to ask, is it any wonder? What are they trying to do? Are they trying to loosen it and normalise it so when this all eventually does come out and the various people who are particularly high up in the SNP start getting named, then it'll be, oh, well, it's just that, and it'll be normalised and he won't have to face any particular punishments. I think that is possible, that one of the things they're doing. Bear that in mind. I'm trying my very best to not get angry, and I am doing very well at not getting angry because I've known about the various names for some time. But it's one of these things where when it does come out, it will utterly, utterly destroy the SNP. I'm not going to be the one that releases it, though. Scottish Tory Justice Secretary Russell Findlay. Before we get that, I will also say that we also have a history of people being a bit touchy-uppy in the SNP, don't we? Mr Patrick Grady, Sex Pest MP, Mr Jordan Linden, Sex Pest Leader of the Council, amongst many others, Mark Kerr, touchy-feely, in prison for it now, SNP, etc. There's lots of them. There's a long history of it. They make it not, so normal to be in the party. It's almost as though it's an initiation regime. You have to do this to be in, just so they've got you. And certainly some seem to like it a bit more than others, is what I'll say. Anyway, Tory Shadow Justice Secretary Russell Findlay has long called for a public inquiry to be launched and hope that this new information may finally poke the SNP into action. I tell you what, here's an interesting thing as well. The SNP aren't going to be in government very much longer. And after the next election at Holyrood, they won't be at all. And whoever gets in will quite simply call this because they know that they are innocent and untouched by it. And at that point, there'll be a lot of people in the SNP suddenly moving to countries which don't have extradition policies, I suspect. Anyway, Russell Findlay continued. He said he told the Scottish Daily Express, survivors on the wide-scale child abuse in Scottish football have had the door slammed in their faces by the SNP government. Some victims have died prematurely, while others who are still alive have given up any hope of ever getting justice. But they are entitled to answers. The SCAI, or a separate inquiry, should establish the scale of the abuse, why victims were silenced, how these crimes were covered up for so long, and the full extent of connections between clubs, PEDs and each other. And the police are involved and the SNP seniors are involved. You've got to take my word for it. I'm not naming names, but they are involved. Humza Yousaf has rejected calls. Well, that's strange, isn't it? A man who brought in that law that eased the punishments for PEDs. Of course he doesn't want it called. He says, but I do hope that these powerful and compelling pleas will cause him to think again. They won't, because the last thing he wants is this to come out, because he knows it will destroy everything. The Scottish Football Association launched its own independent review into historical abuse at clubs and found that predators worked at the likes of Hibs, Celtic, Rangers and Partick Thistle, among other teams. It's wherever there are children gathering, the predators will gather also. Everyone involved needs a full vetting, and in some cases, castration. 9 PEDs linked to Celtic have been convicted of abuse, with former scout Kenneth Divers the latest back in June. The Scottish Government rebuffed these calls for an independent inquiry because the last thing it wants is any linkage between that club and them and a certain person that's very high up in them. A spokeswoman said, our sympathies are with the victims of historical abuse, but we're not going to do anything about it because we daren't. That's not what they said, but it is the truth. They said the independent review of abuse in Scottish football, commissioned by the Scottish FA Board to examine what was known about abuse in Scottish football in the past and what actions were taken as a result, acknowledged the significant physical and mental harm caused to individuals and the need to ensure the safety, rights and well-being of children involved in football today. Then let's have the inquiry. Why are you so shady about it if it isn't because you're up to your dirty yellow necks deep into this abuse? Which, of course, they most undoubtedly are, especially if you know the names involved. Again, in the civil justice system, said Scottish Government also took action to remove a long-standing legal hurdle for adult victims of abuse seeking damages claim. Blah, blah, blah. All rubbish. We don't want to hear any of the crap. We want to hear, yes, you're going to open up an independent inquiry. The inquiry will not be done under the auspices of the Scottish Government, because the Scottish Government are filled with the very people that are involved in this outrage. It's got to be independent, it's got to be Westminster, and it's got to be done under the auspices of some other force. Cannot be Police Scotland, cannot be having anything to do with Scottish legal system. It's got to be Britain, it's got to be Westminster, and it's got to be independent. And it's got to be wide-ranging, and it's got to reveal the names so that I can tell you who it is, and we can do the full discussion on that one. There's people out there who know. Anyway, I shall stop there and come up. And haven't I done well not getting angry? My God, first time ever. When it comes out, and one day it will come out, and you find out who the name is, who the senior name is in the SNP that seems to be linked to this, I'm wondering how many of you will go, oh God, no, and how many will go, yeah, doesn't surprise me. It's weird, and I really want to say, but I can't. It's frustrating, but I do need it to come out. I want it to come out, but it's not going to come out from me because, you know, I don't want to get sued to smithereens, especially not without actual proof. But it's just what I was told by someone, and I believe them. I absolutely believe them. But it is horrific, and it does explain why the SNP don't want this investigated, because it hits way too close to home. We shall see. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope it's sort of told you exactly what you're dealing with the SNP, and it does explain why they refuse to investigate it. Till next time, stay safe, stay well, and I will speak to you later.